The real story behind radicalisation, efforts to tackle the most high-profile social issue of our times. We'll hear from researchers studying why young Muslims travel to Syria and the filmmakers hoping to inspire debate and change lives. I'm Martin Stanford. This is Insight. Welcome to Insight. Governments across Europe and beyond are struggling to deal with the most high-profile social issue of our times, radicalisation. Everyone wants to understand why some young Muslims want to travel to Syria and Iraq, and why some join terror groups like Daesh. Finland is one such country. At least 70 people have travelled abroad to fight, a relatively high number given the small Muslim population. It's raised questions for the security services while fueling a political debate on migration, integration and the future of multiculturalism. Karen Kreutz is a researcher at the University of Helsinki who's been interviewing young Muslims about the phenomenon and its impact on society. We'll hear from her in just a moment. First, here's a short clip from one of those interviews.
It feels that all people who are Muslims, they are being put in this one category, which is like that they are all seen as radical terrorists, ISIS supporters, even though that's not the case. Like, obviously there are some people who are joining now, clearly they want to go to fight alongside with ISIS, but there are so many more that are going just for humanitarian reasons, so many else that are going to fight in other groups, which should be okay. Like even Finnish citizens and European citizens, they are going different parts of the world to fight alongside Russians against Ukraine and alongside Ukrainians to fight against Russia, and there's no problem with that. But now it seems that the situation is very stigmatized in a way that Muslims are seeing from one perspective only, and people kind of are too much affected of this media and how media shows the Syrian issue. Muslims don't feel comfortable because they think that whatever issue they talk about that is linked to, you know, politics and Syrian war and jihad and concepts like this, then they are condemned and seen as terrorists, seen as radical people, seen as fundamentals, whatever. So I think that the ground is not mature enough to discuss these issues.
Let's hear from Karen Kreutz now. Karen, welcome to the programme.
Thank you.
How difficult was it to persuade people to talk to you?
It was a challenge, of course, because the topic is so tense at the moment. People are very distrustful towards sexually all parts of society. But for me, I've studied Islamophobia, for example, from before. So there wasn't this kind of view that I would be a spy or anything like that. People had the possibility to open up to me. Another reason why it's really challenging is the whole climate. This is a difficult topic to talk about, and it's easily that the person who conducts research also becomes seen as part of the problem in this kind of heated media debates.
Is it getting worse?
Yeah, I mean, this has been the direction in Finland has been quite the same as in other European countries with the rise of anti-Islam groups and this kind of terminology. Of course, it's also a question of like media panic. I mean, a lot of people only hear about these catastrophes and things happening, and there is, of course, a lot of fear in society, which then creates this more kind of aggressive way of talking about this.
Media panic. Do you say the media are to blame in some way?
There's a lack of knowledge in this area, and this is one thing that I think where you can see that all parts of society in a way are to blame, because if there would be more in-depth knowledge distributed to society about these issues, there would be possibilities of tackling the question from an analytical perspective. Now at the moment there's a lot of it's a very kind of mythical topic. People don't know much about it. It's the same in research. There is very little data.
Well, it's still a relatively small number of people involved, isn't it?
Absolutely.
I mean, the Muslim population of Finland is tiny.
Absolutely.
Right. Is it almost entirely made up of immigrants too?
Well, there are converts, and actually there has been Muslim communities in Finland for 200 years already. So the history of Islam in Finland is quite old.
And do you think the population is inherently Islamophobic, or do you think that's a recent phenomenon?
I think it's a recent phenomenon. It's just a kind of a similar reaction as in other parts of Europe. It's been, you can see it from 2001 onwards, that this kind of, it's the rhetoric of the extreme right that has been quite the same all over the Western world, focusing much on immigration and on Muslims as a threat to society. And this whole thing with ISIS, for example, has just played in the hands of the extreme right. So,
what did you find were either the single or the couple of key factors as to why a young person growing up, one would imagine, in relative comfort in Finland, wants to go and fight in the Middle East?
Well, there are, the first thing is that it's a phenomenon which is much more diverse than is brought to the fore in media discussions. So I mean, it's not only a question of ISIS. There are also people that go to Syria for either to join other groups, to fight among other groups, or then to do aid work or to somehow do something for the society. That's one thing that is a very difficult phenomenon to approach because it's very simplified. But then if you think about the people that have joined ISIS, which is a specific, it's a small group in itself among all that have left for Syria. But there are push and pull factors that seems to be general also in other countries. One is that of course the situation in Syria has affected the reason for people leaving to Syria. There was a lot of talk in 2012, 2013 about what is happening in Syria, and many felt the responsibility or some kind of solidarity towards the people. But then there was also the like push factor that society is also perceived as more hostile, and people feel that they don't have a possibility of creating a future or having a future,
so
being outside.
These youngsters feel they have no future in Finland?
Yeah,
and they feel that upset, do they, that they haven't been welcomed there?
They feel outside, and I mean many of these young people, they might be, for example, second generation immigrants who they don't have another home country, and then you have all these groups like chanting go home and leave our country and so on, and it's you have to, you are part of your home society is not actually your home society. It's a place that wants to get rid of you. And you hear this in politics, you hear this in media, and it's frustrating.
But you could take two young people maybe who go, I don't know, let's say to the same college or university, and they've got, let's, for the sake of argument, say they've got identical backgrounds. They're both second generation, as you suggest. One decides to take himself, it's often men, isn't it, or young men, to Syria for whatever reason. The other is content to see it. They may have political views, but they're going to use much more peaceful means to express them. What makes the difference between those two people?
Yeah, I also did some resilience interviews. So I interviewed people from the same kind of background, actually in the same kind of social crews as the ones that had left. Yeah. And but they have chosen instead of being like active societally in NGOs or with politics and so on. And they didn't see, one factor why they didn't leave is that they didn't see it as a solution to the conflict or to the situation. And many of them did have more religious knowledge on the topic. So they felt, for example, that the issue of taking a person's life is such a serious issue that you really need to know what it is about if you're taking that road.
Do you think government policies, the establishment, if you like, help this or hinder this? I mean, are they expert enough in what they're applying to these particular groups of young people?
I think one problem is that there aren't actually anywhere expertise enough in this topic, because it's so there are so few studies that actually are based on material and
I mean, have you reached a conclusion of what the government should do?
Yeah, in that sense that at least these kind of stigmatizing approaches where you know Muslims are being blamed, or Muslim communities are being monitored or somehow stigmatized as like suspect
Is
communities.
it the government that's stigmatizing people, or people stigmatizing people?
I think it's people stigmatizing people, but I don't think that there's enough knowledge either on all authority levels about the phenomenon, and because there is a lack of understanding. Also, there's a lack of understanding of Muslim communities in general and of Islam, and this is a phenomenon which has been discussed a lot from the perspective of Islam. It's perceived as some kind of inherent problem in Islam, ISIS, for example,
Yeah.
and this is one thing that then tends to push the communities. So it has created this kind of aura of fear that they don't dare to talk about these issues. And if a young person is thinking about joining ISIS, for example, that young person should be able to get opinions from somebody who actually knows about these things, and
So
they are afraid to talk about it.
Would you say, let's talk about this?
Absolutely.
To everybody?
Absolutely.
Both those who are politically motivated, those who have got violent tendencies. Let's talk about it, get it out there.
Everybody should talk about it, and it should be a thing that would be solved in a way that you would approach it and you wouldn't push it into the shadows, because when you push it into the shadows, it goes to internet, people look for information on the web instead of talking to communities, and this is a big problem.
Karen Kreutz, thank you very much for being with us.
Thank you.
This is Insight. Coming up, we'll examine how a group of filmmakers are trying to tackle radicalisation.